So we're gonna get started while the last people come in, because I'm gonna need every single minute of these 55 minutes to tell you about this, and I hope we don't go over time, but we will do a practical part at the end, so of course if you need to leave, you may do that. Yay! Welcome! Who loves neuroscience? Isn't it great? Okay. So we're here today to talk about neuroscience evidence of the first principles of beauty in nature and architecture. So, a little bit about me. Fun facts, I'm from Barcelona, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. So, of course, I got very influenced by Gaudí. And then ever since, whenever I travel around the States, I just feel awful because, you know, I'm very spoiled. So I'm an architect, researcher, and educator. That means that I design things, I get involved in research projects, and I teach topics around neuroscience and architecture and psychology and architecture online and in person right now. 8 years ago, I created a project called Archi Impact to talk about how architecture impacts people. And right now, I am changing the name to Architecture with Meaning, Vision. So let's get started. So this is a little bit of the update of the learning objectives for our lecture. We're going to be talking about the importance of beauty, and in your tables, there's a reference sheet with some extra articles that you can all check out about the importance of beauty and some research that has been done. Then we're going to gain some vocabulary to identify and communicate traits of beauty, specifically looking at embodied cognition theory. And then in groups, we're going to practice assessing and discussing beauty. So make sure to choose right now your small group of 3. So in tables of 6, we're going to split in 2. So just, you know, the 2 people that are closer to you, you're going to be sharing the little exercise at the end. And I was very worried to be putting an exercise that was insultingly easy. So if you feel insulted, you don't need to do it, but it won't be complicated. Okay? All right. So as many of you in this space know, there is evidence that living and working in enriched environments is essential for brain health. So who in the audience doesn't recognize this image? Or is the first time seeing this image? You? Okay. Yes, those are the neurons of the mouse brain. And this image is sort of synthesizes a bunch of experiments that started in 1999 that were looking at what happens when you put rats in a cage with sensorial and motor and social stimuli versus rats that are not, in a cage that there's nothing. And they found out that the rats in enriched environments had their neurons were growing more dendrites and were better connected throughout the brain than those who didn't. So ever since then, we've been trying to apply these ideas to architecture. And here in the background, you can see the image of a psychiatric facility. And it's one of the typical images that are shown to explain how we can apply, patterns of nature and enrich environment elements to spaces to support our brain health. And I'm sure, as many of you know here, we know the deal, plants, natural lights, non-rhythmic patterns, all these things that we've been trying to apply to architecture. And here at this conference, there's people doing wonderful work in this respect. But the motivation that brought me to this field of research on embodied cognition was that I was seeing all these, inspiring examples, and I was wondering, these things that we're doing with plants and natural lights, is that alone a recipe for beauty? And I found myself disappointed so many times. We're trying very hard to do these places that, are inspiring and grounding, but how are we making sure that these places actually are beautiful? Because sometimes, the results, maybe I have very fine taste because I come from Barcelona, but I sort of just not always found this empathy connection with the place. So I thought that we needed to go back to science to look again what's happening in the brain when we perceive beauty and what actually beauty consists of. And it's only been recently or later through the years that I've been able to articulate why this is important. So I'm going to read to you a small text that I recently wrote for the platform Architecture with Meaning that says, "Our current societies encourage practices of meaninglessness, the reproduction of generic objects, spaces, and templates in our daily lives that do not capture emotions, nature, or care, and that only stress our cognitive systems, which starve for safety. This context structures our lives and is favored by the objectivity aspects of the white supremacy culture, which also fails to consider human health, social health, and the environment. We must rebuild our culture. A renewed culture will exist in a collection of meanings, displayed, intensified, and made important in built material anchors. When we live in settings that structure our lives around well-being, care, and creativity, we will be closer to the healing we need." So what does that mean? That, to me, the built environment, buildings really materialize meaning into form. They say things to us. They express values. And the built environment that we have in our current cities is really expressing white supremacy culture. So we really needing a change here of culture. And I am here to advocate for buildings that express a new set of values that can really elevate care and creativity and softness and rest and all these things that we need to practice. So I'm not the only one saying this. I really recommend you to watch this TED Talk by Thomas Heatherwick, "The Rise of Boring Architecture and the Case for Radically Human Buildings," because we don't replace buildings that we love. So the more we build buildings that are beautiful and meaningful, the less they need to be replaced, the more sustainable it is for us all. And in contrast with the other healthcare facility, I'm bringing you here the Maggie's Lit Center, designed by Heatherwick Studio, which is way more beautiful. So I hope that by the end of this talk, you will be able to say why, to understand why this example is more compelling to our brains and to our bodies than the previous one. It's in the UK. All right, so let's dive into the theory. Embodied cognition theory. So when I teach this to my students, I spend at least 2 hours only on embodied cognition. It's a very complex topic, so we're gonna have to go quickly on it today. The embodied cognition theory mainly tells us that the way we experience the world and the way we cognize, means the way we gain knowledge about anything, has to do with our physical experiences. Okay. This is sort of a big idea. It takes a long time in reading on embodied cognition to fully grasp, because we're very used to think of the environment as something separate from ourselves. But when we're perceiving the world, we're really just embodying it through our previous physical experiences. So to make it easier to understand this, I'm bringing you here an experiment, and this is a paper. There's 2 things that I want you to focus on. One is a word or 2 words in the title that say embodied simulation, and another one is Vittorio Gallese. So embodied simulation is an idea we'll be talking about, and Vittorio Gallese is the person who invented this word and who has lots of wonderful research on embodied simulation and embodied cognition. So this experiment, what it consisted of, they showed to a series of participants who were laying in an fMRI these 4 images, and then they recorded what was happening in their brain. In the first image, you can see an arm touching a chair. In the second image, you can see a branch touching a body. In the third image, you can see an arm touching a body. And in the last image, you can see a branch touching a chair. And then they looked at what was happening in their brains. So in the first row, we see the results that link to the first image, second row, second image, and so forth. But as you can see, with some differences, more or less the brain is being activated in the same areas. And these areas are actually the sensory and motor cortexes that are right here in the middle of our head, and in particular, those representing the arm and the hand. So what does that mean? These areas of the brain represent your arm and your hand, and they are active when you want to touch something. So that means that in the same areas that I represent my movement and my sense of touch are being activated when I see somebody else touching, another arm touching, mirror neurons, nothing new. But what is revolutionary is that the same mechanism is happening when two inanimate objects touch each other. We are understanding the world through what we know. Two objects touching each other, okay, this must be like an arm touching a body. So we are simulating, back to that word, embodied simulation, we are simulating what must be happening outside in the world with what we know. Bodies, body parts, with what we have in our brain, the ability to move our body. Okay? So, with that in mind, who can tell me, when you see this building, what are you simulating? What part of your brain do you think it's being activated right now as you see this image? Balance, falling. Okay, correct. Yes. Intercorporeity, this funny word that explains to us what's happening. Intercorporeity, we're exchanging our body with the building. We're exchanging it, and then we feel, this is out of balance. And we can feel that sort of weird feeling about it. So this building is actually not so out of balance. It has its counterpart across the street. Yes. This is in Madrid. So this is way better, right? Sigh of relief. We might be embodying two legs or two arms. There's something of balance and of greatness in this architecture. Lucio Fontana. Do you know this artist? Yes? Okay. So who can tell me what's happening in this painting or this artwork? What are we seeing? Cats. Yes, thank you. So Lucio Fontana is famous for his canvases that have cats. Okay. So we're going to look at another neuroscience experiment here. But before I show you the results, what areas of the brain do you think that are activated in your brain right now as you're looking at this canvas with cats? Again? Pain. What else? Fear. What else? Claws or nails. Ooh, maybe. Caution. Yeah. Caution. Okay. Anything else? You think it's being activated as you look this image? Like escaping response, fight or flight. Okay. All right. So let's look at what happened. They showed these three images to participants with the three images of Lucio Fontana and three control images that just had lines. And they looked at what was happening in their brains while they were having an electroencephalogram helmet on. And as you can see, the people looking at the originals had something way more activated than the people not looking at the originals. And that area that was very activated is, again, here, the arm and the hand. So what does that mean? That when we see this painting of Lucio Fontana, we are simulating the action that I would need to do in order to produce this result. And I'm not only simulating, okay, I come here and with my arm I do this gesture. I'm also simulating the energy behind it and the emotion behind it. So I simulate, okay, quickly do this movement. And then I feel how the artist must have been feeling when they did that. So I'm always embodying external objects to understand also the intentions of their creators and the emotions of their creators, okay? So first, in the other example, we were talking about intercorporeity. I exchange my body with the body of the building. Here, it would be more of an intermentality. I exchange my mind with the mind of the creator to understand, oh, this is how they were feeling. This is their intention, okay? So this is my definition of embodied simulation: the imaginative reuse of our own mental and physical states attributed to foreign objects and its creators. Picture time. Yes, okay. So we're really using imagination to go through the world. We're imagining all this movement and all these bodies through our own experience. And everything that I'm talking about, I've not invented. It comes, a lot of it, from this wonderful book that I really recommend that's called Architecture and Embodiment by Francis Malgrave, who is a wonderful, wonderful author and architect and teacher. And there is a quote from this book that I wanted to share with you all that says, "People experience all spaces motorically. That is, through the movements or simulated movements of their bodies. Architectural spaces that are comfortably scaled and gracious to the user are perceived as pleasing because they endow the body with a certain dignity." So here we start to see the connection between embodiment and embodied simulation and beauty. So not any posture and any movement is going to endow the body with a certain dignity. There's certain postures, certain movements, certain ways of holding your body that are way more pleasing and dignifying than others. Like when we look at the ballet, we love it because there's something about, the flexibility and the posture and the control and the speed and the movement that we see in these bodies that is activating our mirror neurons, and through our own motor cortexes, we're feeling, whoa, like you're feeling as if you were the ballerina, and if you don't have the training, that feels amazing because you worked zero and you can feel this amazing, posture and movement. So now we start to understand a little bit better why the building on the right was not as beautiful as the building on the left. Simply because there's not a lot of material for my body to embody on the right. This column, it's kind of just like, very straight, touching the ceiling, no transition, no sense of touch or of force, it's just there. The window, kind of rectilinear, it's just, my body has a harder time to empathize with this space. I cannot feel it in my guts. It doesn't connect. The mind of the creator, yes, I can see there's some, intention of color matching the wall and the wood and, the plants. We appreciate it, but it's not transmitting me like a sexy mind, like, wow, creativity. Oh my God. That's how I feel when I look at Gaudí. But in the other image in the left, yes, if we're just borrowing the mind of the creator for a second and we go, wow, that person must be having a good day when they thought about this. Yeah, it's like, wow, it's creative, it's vital. And in terms of form, it's also, giving me so much material for my brain to embody it. There's these curved lines, there's this tension, there's this sense of expansion and openness. It's way more embodiable. I invent so many words around this topic because they don't exist. Okay. So we're going to continue looking at these first principles of beauty in nature and architecture, which is a super speculative theory that I've developed out of Malgrave's ideas. And around this screen, you can see some of the sketches that those I drew for a class that I was giving earlier this year to explain to my students a little bit more, what types of movement and what types of touch I'm talking about when I'm talking about these things. We won't have time today to go over this. Again, as I was saying, I can spend 2 to 4 hours just on the details. We don't have this type of time today, so I'm just going to give you some general words on these ideas in the intersection of embodiment, beauty, and architecture. And we're going to be looking at physical traits and psychological traits, again, because we're embodying the form of the building, but also the mind of its creator. So first one, movement, easy. This is a building by Gaudí. the little schools at the foot, like at the foot of the Sagrada Familia. So of course, this roof, it's expressing a lot of movement, and a pleasant movement, sort of an organic movement, like maybe this part of movement control in my brain's being activated, this sense of fluidity, almost like the ballerina. This is pleasant to see, it's embodiable, great. But there's many ways to express movement, and as I was saying, when I teach this to my students, we spend a lot of time on like all the different ways to express movement. This, for me, also has movement. As you can see, these windows, when we perceive them, there's experiments that show that when we see several dots moving in a screen, we always infer that they're chasing each other, or they're dancing, or they're moving, because that's what we know that bodies can do. That's the only resource we have to understand the world. So we see these windows that are sort of moving from each other or between each other. And on the right side of the building, with this awning going up, it's giving a sense of ascension, which is a type of movement. The experience of this building would be very different if this awning was flat and if the windows were all next to each other in a grid. Nothing comparable. There's way more, material for empathy and for experience in this design. Okay, another one, touch. So there's also many ways to touch, but this one, it's pretty interesting. So instead of having this column touching the ceiling in sort of a flat way, there is sort of a transition there. It almost seems as if there is a hand grabbing onto the beam, or a couple fingers grabbing onto the beam. That is way more easier to understand for our brains than flat surface with flat surface. There is a sense of touch, a sense of connection. And who knows, maybe this area of our brain that represents our hands and our arms are being activated as we look at that. And there's many ways of touching. This one too, there's a sense of tension, of leaning towards here, that it's way more interesting and engaging than if these buildings were squared. Softness. So this is an aspect of touch. Of course, places that express softness are going to be perceived as pleasing. Malgrave also says nobody wants to lean against a rough column of concrete that promises, this pleasure. But when we see something that promises us softness, then we're way more excited about it because, hello, we're a body. Yes, so softness here. We'll go back to this image later. Something to say about posture. Also, buildings that express sort of a sense of uprightness are easier to embody. So when we are building a tower, there's something about the proportions that we choose that if they come close to what the body is for us, or even exaggerate that sense of being, expanded all the way up and straightened up, are easy to embody, easy to empathize with. And another type of posture would be that of resting or of laying down horizontally, that we can also understand and embody. So we see that the body and the mind are so closely related, right? A posture always carries on emotional meaning with it. So one thing is to feel equilibrated and upright, and another one to lay horizontally. It's expressing way more calmness here, plus all the movement of this wonderful Toyo Ito. Okay, and with posture, there's also this idea of equilibrium and disequilibrium that we can play with. So this building, despite all of the disequilibrium, seems way more interesting than the building at the back of it. Well, because it's engaging our body, like the tower in Madrid. We can feel this sense of, I'm losing balance, versus the other ones we were seeing before that really, build on that sense of equilibrium. Okay, now moving into the psychological traits. So to me, in this image, there's a sense of carefulness. Like, if you're rushing, you have a very busy day, you don't do this. You need carefulness. You need time and effort and delicate thinking and tracing and the ceiling to achieve this. This is in one of the buildings of Gaudí again, the master. So carefulness. And we're embodying the space. We can embody this softness, this movement, but also the mind of the creator. And that's really adding to this space. This is another example that to me also is helping me embody this sense of carefulness and attention to detail, but without the softness. So this is Mies van der Rohe. And the amazingness of these spaces is that when you see them, you can really like grasp like the perfection and attention to detail and like carefulness and thoughtfulness and time that went into designing this space. And whoa, it's like pleasant to embody for a moment, you know, this sense of attention and craftness. But here there's no softness. The body might have it's sort of a more rigid space. So in terms of form embodiment, it's like a little harder, but the psychological is really amazing. So it compensates. And during that epoch of last century, we really were giving way more importance to the psychological than to the physical. So then there's all these buildings that are like psychologically wonders, but physically a little hard. So I really advocate for buildings that physically bring back that softness that we need to rebuild our culture. Then another psychological quality, it's creativity. So here we just see a wall of brick, but as you see it, there's something else. It's like, the person who laid the bricks or who asked somebody else to lay the bricks, you know, was doing like a little creative wink. They chose to move some in an angle, to put some upside down. There is a human intention behind. There is a desire for creativity or to, you know, it is pleasing to see because for a second when I look at it, I'm embodying the mind of the creator. Or in sort of a bigger scale, Gaudí again, you know, when we see this, we're just like overwhelmed at the amount of creativity that's necessary to produce something like that. And also a sense of vitality, no? This is a trencadís that's made with these pieces of ceramic that are broken and then put back together in this like super long bench. So we are embodying there that sense of creativity because this is not what we see under there every day, and we can imagine like, oh, that person must have had a good idea to come to this conclusion and do this, and we appreciate that, especially as architects that are working on this field. We always appreciate some creativity in our environments. And then another one that I really like is generosity. So, okay, photographer, I need a photo right now because this is a building that my friend designed, and I just want to show her. Wait, I'm going to stand here. So, generosity. So, yes. So, yeah. So this is a space for children, right? In terms of physical form, hey, they were working, you know, in the basement of a building. There's not much to do, but they chose to locate these floating circles that are probably lamps in the ceiling to sort of create this dreamy space for the children. When I see that, I just feel the generosity of this designer, the thought, I want to create sort of a cloud or a dreamy space for these children. And when I see this, I can embody that carefulness, that respect, but especially that generosity of the designer. So these are like quick tricks to make a space beautiful and empathetic. It's like if you really care, you know, to the user and you do the minimum that you can, you know, you might not have the most amazing space to start with that you're remodeling, but any care of gifting or helping or offering to the users is gonna be perceived. Like we do that naturally all the time. We're exchanging our mind with whoever offered us this space, and we can embody their values and what they were trying to do for us. So we appreciate it. Okay. So this is the short, unfinished list of embodied traits in architecture. There's probably many more that you have in your minds right now or that you can think of. It's definitely not complete, but these are some ideas. And now let's look a little bit about examples of nature. Also gonna check the time. Ooh, okay. So we're going to quickly look at the examples of nature, because nature is a little bit different than architecture. There's a lot of times one really, commonly embodied trait is the sense of expansiveness. Like we can feel it in our lungs when we look at an open landscape. Also, sense of greatness is like if you're exchanging your body with this space, you're like, yeah, you feel that like greatness in your mind and in your body. Common trait of nature. There's also this sense of posture and uprightness, but with mountains, to me, there's very much a sense of gravity, or just like feeling that groundedness of like the amount of mass that you're looking at. And also in nature all the time, we're embodying this sense of aliveness and of movement, of course. Vitality, that makes us feel alive also, versus embodying a lack of vitality. It's like, we say this all the time when we see a plant in your neighbor's house. You're like, oh, this plant is dying. This plant is sad. Like, we can feel them because we're exchanging ourselves for this landscape or this plant, and we're saddened at the lack of vitality because we are alive beings. We need energy. With a field of flowers, I often have a sense of community, because if you're exchanging yourself for the object, and then there's like a lot of these objects, you're like, oh, there's a lot of me. There's a sense of community, there's a sense of togetherness. And here quickly, I just wanted to show you that with architecture, we can be inspired by nature, but in a non-direct way at all. Again, I'm exchanging myself for one of these buildings, and then for all the other ones, I have a sense of community. Oh, there's many of me. There's many bodies. We are a group. And then nature, to me, has a lot of grace. Like in every tree, I just see this ballerina, this posture, and also expresses a lot of sense of resilience. When we see this landscape transform throughout the seasons in spring, part of what we're feeling is this awe at the resilience of nature that we aspire to have ourselves. Okay, so unfinished list of embodied traits in nature. Some are similar, some are a little different. But we don't have, unfortunately, all the time to dive into those differences. So we're moving into practice. So you have in your tables this sheet, and the tables at the back, I'm really sorry, I wasn't expecting all these people to be here. So you don't have one for each, but you hopefully have at least one in each table so that you can copy it with the pads that you have in the center of the tables. So we're just going to be practicing on embodying certain qualities in a couple examples that I'm going to show you, and evaluating and assessing how much of these qualities are being met in these spaces. Using the Likert scale, very easy. In this middle, it's neutral, not a lot or not too little, just neutral. And then good, excellent to the right, and poor, very poor to the left. Okay, so this building. So I'm going to be showing you two examples for a contest of ideas, for a hospice for the mentally ill. And building number A, or building A, it's this idea in which they create almost like a greenhouse in between two buildings in the city. This was a contest with open location. You could choose wherever you wanted to plant your building. So they chose to do it between two buildings of the city. There is this sort of greenhouse cover. And the main idea of this proposal for a hospice for the terminally ill is that there's going to be a certain program that's going to be connected by this park with water, with plants, with trees, with sounds. So here you can see a couple more images of these young designers, of these little corners where people can just hang out and also have doctor visits and then go back to the park. In axonometric, we can see, this idea of the several corners where there's program interconnected by the nature with this cover. Okay? So that's going to be our building A, and this is building B, responds to the same briefing. In this case, they chose to locate the building in nature, and it's sort of a donut. You're going to see closer now. Built with rammed earth and with these openings. So here we can see the building. And here are some interior views. In between those thick walls, there are some cutout forms that can be seating spaces or windows. We can see some multi-postural, soft padding in the floor to seat, different spaces. Here we see a little closer, and the donut with two rings, one in the center with more of those windows where people can sit, and another one in the outside with the program. And in the center, a tree and, some greenery. So building A, building B, building A, building B. Which one is more beautiful to you? Just take a moment to choose one. Doesn't matter. Both are beautiful. Okay. You have one in mind already? Yes? Awesome. So now let's think why the one you picked, it's the most beautiful to you. And I'm saying to you because beauty is subjective. And now we've seen to what point it's like I'm exchanging my physical experience for the body and the creator that for the building, So my sense of beauty is going to be absolutely related to my physical experiences, to my preferences, to what really sparks my mind and my body. So it's going to be different for all of us, but the common thread is that high psychological values and pleasant postures are always going to be, pleasantly perceived by most of us. So now, take a moment to write down one physical trait and one psychological trait that you appreciate in that building that you found more beautiful. Okay? And I'm not showing you the list again because I want you to think it could be something outside the list. One physical trait and one psychological trait that you appreciate. Just one. You can write it on the corner of paper. We're going to be moving it to the scale, to that sheet right now. But just think one, okay? Take a moment. One physical trait, one psychological trait that you appreciate. Example, I could choose one of these traits. One for physical, one for psychological that I really appreciate in this environment that I found the most beautiful. Okay? Does everyone have it? I'm really sorry you people at the back don't have tables to write on or groups, but let's see what we can. So in groups of 3, now you're going to share that with your group teammates. And you're going to write in this table, person A is going to share what physical trait and psychological trait they chose, and we're going to put it on the first row of each. Then person B is going to share, then person C is going to share, and the 3 people in the group are going to have the same table. So this is an example of what this table could look like, okay? So now take a moment to talk with your group and share these physical traits and psychological traits. If you found one that it's repeated, then just choose another. Yay, work time. People at the back, you can also do it. So, the goal is to write it down. Write it down. We need to keep moving. Just write it down. Okay, 30-second warning. All right, coming to an end here. All right, people, enough. So now you have in your tables written down these several traits, okay? Building A, building B. We have in these tables silence. Lights off, lights off. Gente! Okay, so now, individual practice. Go back to your body and to your mind, and in the next 3 minutes, with those qualities that you picked from your teammates and yourself, let's just assess how much of it, using the Likert scale from 1 to 5, how much of these qualities are in building A versus building B, okay? 3 minutes, individual silence. I don't want to hear a fly. There's a question. Okay. Individual practice, people. Individually, we are assessing how much of these qualities are there in each building. So because we're embodied buildings, we cannot talk and think at the same time. We're using the same neurons to do that, so we need to be quiet to think. Okay, 30-second warning. So individually, we are filling out these sheets. Okay? Okay, guys, we're coming to your favorite part of talking to each other, but just one more second. Okay, so let's assume that we now all have, oh, thank you, Angel, whoever you are. We have filled out individually what we think, these qualities are, how much these qualities are expressed in these spaces, and now yes. In small groups, let's discuss and explain to each other which one is more beautiful to you and why. Okay, this is simply for mutual inspiration, intellectual stimulation. Let's share what we see in the spaces, which one we think is more beautiful, why, how we have assessed these qualities that we borrowed from our neighbors. And then we'll do a lot of sharing with everyone, okay? So, time. Now you can talk to your small groups. Now you don't... So if you've had a chance to discuss it, now you can choose one person from the group, one building, and one quality for the general sharing, okay? Choose one person, one building that you find the most beautiful, and one quality. Ooh, magic. I like that trick of the glass. Okay, let's choose one person, one building, and one quality. Yes? Oh, 1 second. I'm going to give you the mic. So, wait, just because there's a slide, I'm just going to put it here. Yay. So now tell us which one is more beautiful to you and why. And the volunteers are going to have to use a microphone because we're recording this talk.
Building B, vitality, because if it's a hospice, having that sense of life and movement is great.
What part of the building expresses and transmits to you that sense of vitality?
The movement in the structure, the form.
Awesome, thank you. Just like that. Okay. You here, thank you.
So building B spoke very strongly to me, and the word that I guess I would go toward would be posture, because when you see it from afar, you feel like you're just laying on very soft cloud or a bed of moss, and then the posture, the way that they have these nooks carved out for you that is just built to just hold your body the way that you want to just be curled up. So building B all the way.
Thank you so much. Okay, building B is winning for now.
So points-wise, I actually got a tie with both, but I'm leaning towards A, with kind of like generosity, being that nature is inside the building and you can create your own spaces in there. It just immediately I got led that way, even though both are beautiful.
Thank you, Vaughn. We must be soulmates. I agree. The generosity in building A is my favorite too. Like, how beautiful, right? In a city, to choose to make this park and this space of wonder and calm for people who are going through a hard time, who are terminally ill. That touches me so much. There was another person who wanted to talk here.
Despite that, building B for me is much more appeal in defense of the building A. I concur with you, because what we share here is that Mom is calling.
No. That was the timer, so that means we're perfectly on time.
Okay, just to tie the score, we think that, I think the building A, it's a more winter cold weather, and that's why they provide this kind of greenhouse to make it more warm, and that generosity to provide this nature inside to really have the nature of the warmth of the nature inside. It's that kind of generosity. Of course, we tend to think that building B is the only one that embodies that, but it's the context that will provide different situation. I am from the tropics, and of course, building B needs high scales because it's so hot, and winter, cross ventilation. It's the kind of building that probably we will be more tend to adopt, and the from the earth or whatever, the texture and the materials. But in defense of the building A and to tie the score, I think it's beautiful.
Awesome, thank you so much. So you were going to the point of simulating your experience in the building in the different seasons and how, your body would be feeling. That's awesome. A couple more volunteers that want to share? Yay, okay. I'm going to go to the person in the back that just raised a hand before.
Thank you. Initially, for me, it was building B for a number of reasons, but then in our discussion, I started thinking about building A, the openness towards the sky, and a concern that in our city life and our light pollution, we've lost half of what it means to be human in not having a relationship with the night sky, with the stars, with the vastness. And I wonder what that's doing to us compared to more indigenous peoples for whom that was a deep part of their identity. So from that perspective, building A might represent an opening, but my bet is it's also in an urban environment and you can't see the stars there either.
So question for you, what is the psychological trait you think you're embodying through your imagination of this place at night with the opening and the stars?
Yeah, so there'd be a twofold answer to that. The one would be grief, because I'm in inner city Detroit. I barely get to see the moon and Sirius once in a while, the star Sirius. So loss, psychologically, lament is part of it. Remembering my childhood and having vistas that opened up, its awesomeness and wondrousness. It's the sense of being small in a great big mystery.
Thank you so much. So I would say there also some generosity in offering that space of melancholy and reconnection to that landscape. Thank you so much. So we have one person at the front and one person here. Okay, I'm just going to go that direction. So these heels are very high.
So softness, building B, and thinking about the program for end-of-life care and rammed earth, so like physically soft, but also all in the curvature and the undulating effects of the building, and then to have the tree at the center of the donut, showing that, like, you know, this soft, gentle, kind of delicate thing is in the center of all life, and that from every perspective within the building, that is the central figure. I feel like in that kind of softness, contrasted in A, that has like a little bit more rigidity in its shape and its A-line, which complements its context, but I feel like B just really like rests in its space.
Thank you so much. So architects in the room, do you hear that? Softness, hello. We don't like straight lines all the time. Yeah, it's not a trend to do curves. It's really the brain. We love it.
The thing that stood out to me, that kind of stood out beyond beauty initially, was the strength in building A and the structure required to create that vault. To me, stood out a lot, and it provided a generosity in the space. And I thought that that respect kind of was the overwhelming experience of both of these buildings, and that that vault provides, you know, these people are moving towards death, and that upward movement towards this higher place, and just it requires strength to go through that process, and it's a beautiful space to be able to transition, and so that really stood out, building A.
Thank you so much. That quality of ascension and verticality. Oh, yes. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. What all these traits really have in common is the person. You know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder so very much. So I really advocate for reading our built environments from ourselves, from the person. It's not a set of objects or nature patterns we're putting together. It's really ourselves that we're feeling in the space. And this is my personal definition of beauty, something of sensory value that reflects our lived world through imagination. So it's really a chance as designers to express something of ourselves and something of our ideal version of ourselves in this space. And it's an offering for the users to embody those traits. And just going back to this idea of elevating these qualities, we need to materialize into form way more creative, pleasurable, generous, imaginative, soft qualities, because we are building belonging and we're unbuilding a white supremacist culture that does not really speak to us about all these things that we really need to be whole beings. So thank you so much. Yes. If you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them. I just also want to share with you, this wonderful website project that I have that is Architecture with Meaning. So please follow me on alm.vision or write down this website. It's going to be a super fun educational project with a community hall. We organize meetings every month to join and discuss about these ideas with other folks that love neuroscience and psychology and architecture. And there's a library where you can read and keep growing and learning on that ecosystem of resources that we planted together, and research projects and much more. So I'll see you around. Thank you.